DMV Download, the new daily podcast from WTOP News, is out now. Hosts Megan Clorty and Luke Garrett get the story behind the story.
Every weekday afternoon, Megan and I will go beyond the headlines with WTOP reporters and sources to bring you more on the biggest local stories impacting you, our fellow Washingtonians.
The DMV Download podcast is available now on all major podcast platforms. Subscribe today so you don't miss an episode. The DMV Download podcast is presented by Steamfitters Local 602.
Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Tomorrow marks the 20th anniversary of Ana Gasteyer's final appearance on Saturday Night Live on May 18th, 2002. I spoke to Gasteyer in 2016 when she came home to Washington, D.C. for a special concert at Arena Stage, sharing memories of her favorite SNL sketches from The Culps to Sweaty Balls. Thanks so much for taking the time, Ana.
Thank you for having me.
I know you're born and raised in D.C. We can get to that in a minute, but what exactly is going on at this event?
You know, it's to honor Arena Stage, and it's their annual gala to raise money, mostly for this amazing theater and organization. And I'll be doing my act, which I tour the country with, and singing a bunch of ridiculous songs from my Ridiculous Jazz album, and telling stories, I'm sure, about growing up in D.C. and other things. It should be a really good time. They have this annual event. This is their shindig, their big blowout for the year. So
this is like their Kennedy Center honors or something.
I wouldn't say it's honors exactly, but yeah, it's to raise money for the theater. So yeah.
Well, tell me, you mentioned you have a Ridiculous Jazz album. Go into that.
It has a lot of really old, some standards and some old novelty songs from further back to the 30s and 40s that are kind of revisited in a jazzy way. The act is kind of a nod to that great performers era of the late 50s, early 60s, and Supper Club.
Marlene Dietrich, or
yeah, somewhere in there. Betty Hutton is probably closer. Danny Kaye, it's a little old fashioned, and it's me, so it's a little modern, but. It definitely is a genre that I really relate to and that I connect to, and musically that's really fun because it's so improvisational, and it's the lyrics are often really important, and I'm a lyrics person in terms of they drive the story they tell, that they are they tend to be kind of fun and complicated and not just sort of there as a afterthought.
Right. Many songs, it's like they're a throwaway thing just to accompany the beat or something. To me, it's the story. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, and that's sort of that's something that all great American songs do, is tell a great story, and that's something that I love to perform. So that's the kind of music that I've been drawn to, and it does have. Like I said, like sort of a late 50s, early 60s vibe to it. A little bit of a throwback vibe, and a vibe where, basically I like it when people, have a couple cocktails while I'm performing. So it's sort of, it's got a supper club, nightclub vibe to it.
That makes it an easier crowd if they're a few deep by the time.
Oh yeah, I always enjoy a drunk crowd more than a not drunk crowd. They tend to be out to have a good time, and that's the only reason I perform is so people have a good time. So I'm not out to change the world,
Drunk crowd better than a drunk performer.
Happy drunks, yeah.
Exactly. Well, I mean, a lot of us who've seen you, you've made us laugh for so much. A lot of us might not know that. A lot of our listeners might not know that you've been classically trained singer, and I think you played violin since you were like age 5. Talk about sort of those early days growing up in D.C. and how you fell for music. Yeah,
I definitely started as a musician. I am known as a comedian, and that's mostly what I do. That's how I make my living. But this act in particular, it was born sort of out of reconciling those two things together, because they are really separate. And I like my professional debut was as a child chorister in the Washington Opera. And I was definitely from like a much more classical training bent as a kid, and then I sang my way into Northwestern University in Chicago, and that's actually where I found comedy, because it's huge there. Improv comedy was born in Chicago, so that's really where I started found my comedy people. But yeah, that's why. So you already spoke to it. Basically, I was a classical vocalist and a violinist throughout my childhood there. So it wasn't until after SNL when I kind of came back around to singing in a way that I related to, kind of started my own act and got my own band going and made music the way that kind of fit me a little bit better.
Were there any DC-centric, theaters or concert venues you remember going to as a kid? Or did they have like a singing group at Sidwell Friends? Talked about the sort of the community, the arts community. The
arts community is in D.C., yeah. I mean, I was absolutely raised, my parents were very involved in the arts. So I already mentioned the Washington Opera, but I studied at the Washington School of Ballet, and it was all very traditional. But the main thing I was going to say is that one of the main reasons I'm so looking forward to this is I actually grew up deeply connected to the Arena stage. My parents were members there, and our very close family friends were the Proskys. Bob Prosky was one of the great tentpoles of that organization as a rep theater company, and Libby Bauer was a schoolmate of mine at Sidwell. And her parents, Richard Bauer and Hala Wines, were both Arena ensemble members. So I think I saw 30 shows there or something growing up, and it had such a huge influence on my becoming a performer because it was just smart, interesting, interpretive, great theater. So so for a city relatively cosmopolitan but small. I mean, now that I live in New York and I realize how much effort it takes to put on good theater, it's really impressive. And I know that the rest of the theater scene there, I know people from the Signature Theater, I know people, Woolly Mammoth. I mean, these are great American. This has become one of the great American theater cities, Washington. So I'm excited to go down there and support the Arena because it really had a huge, huge influence on my ideas that I could become an actor, which is cool.
Definitely. You just mentioned a few seconds ago, you said it was Northwestern, is that right?
I did, yeah.
Explain specifically how you discovered comedy. When was that first moment you got a laugh and said, hey, this sounds good?
Yeah, it's funny, people always say were you the class clown? I mean, almost everyone, all my friends from Sidwell are really funny people. It was a very kind of clever bunch that I hung out with. I definitely was, in retrospect, probably, the performance thing was really my bag. When I was in high school, I did every play and every musical, and we had there's a really wonderful drama teacher there, Ed Crow, that and he's actually a drummer as well, that really influenced me, and John Elko as well, that are both, they're again active in the DC theater scene, worked at the Folger, worked at the Arena, and so I kind of knew I wanted to be a performer, but I didn't know, and I knew I was a good funny performer just from plays and stuff like that. But when I got to college, there was an improv show that was kind of legendary, and I auditioned for it and got in, and immediately sort of realized, oh my God, these are my people.
What was the improv show?
It's called the Meow Show. It's just Northwestern's improv crew. Yeah, a lot of Northwestern churns out a lot of well-known actors, but there have been a lot over the years that have done the Meow Show as well. So yeah.
So what brought you from there to New York then? Did you get into the whole? Chicago's like a legendary comedy scene. So did you get into that and make the jump?
Yeah, I actually went to L.A. On the advice of some Chicago people. Kind of followed a bunch of people that way, and then I did the Groundlings out in L.A., which is a sketch comedy. Sketch and improv company that is fantastic, and it's a kind of a huge gateway to Saturday Night Live, and that's how I got seen for SNL, and then I moved to New York to do SNL, and then once I was in New York, I was like, I really miss music, and so I started auditioning for a lot of the casting directors here in town as a singer, and then after I left SNL, I started working. I spent about 4 years really, really in pursuit of a true career. I had to make up for a lot of time. Musical theater is really hard, and takes a lot of discipline and training. And so I just put my nose to the grindstone, and I did 4 Broadway shows in a row, and I did a bunch out of town, and a couple off Broadway. So that's sort of where I had to catch up on my theater bona fides.
Stay tuned for the rest of my conversation with Ana Gasteyer, but first a message from a fellow WTOP podcast.
DMV Download, the new daily podcast from WTOP News, is out now. Hosts Megan Clorty and Luke Garrett get the story behind the story.
Every weekday afternoon, Megan and I will go beyond the headlines with WTOP reporters and sources to bring you more on the biggest local stories impacting you, our fellow Washingtonians.
The DMV Download podcast is available now on all major podcast platforms. Subscribe today so you don't miss an episode. The DMV Download podcast is presented by Steamfitters Local 602.
Welcome back to Beyond the Fame with the rest of my conversation. Welcome back to Beyond the Fame for the rest of my conversation with Ana Gasteyer.
Well, before even SNL, I think did I see you in like some small TV roles? Didn't you get turned away by the soup Nazi in Seinfeld?
Oh yeah, I did TV. I did a little bit of TV. Yeah, for sure.
What was it like getting told no soup for you?
It was my first TV job.
And you were turned away.
I was turned away. Yeah, it was great. I was so excited. Are you kidding? It was like a legendary episode.
Oh, it's probably the most famous one. Okay, and then you mentioned your Broadway shows, but before we get to that, I do want to move chronologically a little bit more. The SNL days, just quick memories on the Culps.
Oh my God! Well, it's so fun. They were. I actually tweeted about them yesterday because it was National Music Teacher Appreciation Day. Who knew?
That would have been the perfect venue for you guys to go sing.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, you're right. Yeah, they were. We wrote them at the show. It was incredibly fun. It was always an amazing exercise in procrastination. We're kind of famous for that, and it was just always. It was always it was like a labor of love. I mean, we just did them because they were fun to write, they were fun to perform.
Do you and Will? I mean, did you sit down and the two of you came up with which songs you were gonna do, or was it the writer?
Yeah, and Paul Appel. No, with the three of us, always wrote them. Yeah, and it's so funny because the songs were always this like afterthought where we would work on. The hardest thing was kind of finding the story and recreating the disasters that would befall them en route, and then we would jam out those medleys usually to involve something modern and just try to think about it. It was really fun to do the arrangement in the way that they would do it, And I have to give credit to Cheryl Hardwick, who was our early musical director. She left actually halfway through my tenure there, but she was there for 25 years.
Was the trick sort of taking something, I don't know, like modern and making it seem very straight-laced, like, dumps like a truck.
Yeah, exactly. We would always have fun with, exactly what they would say.
Now, obviously, probably the most legendary was with you and Alec and the sweaty balls. How did that one come up? And, which restaurant in D.C. serves the best sweaty balls?
Oh, God. That one came up, again, those were characters that I did a lot, those NPR characters. I grew up in an NPR household and have a conflicted love-hate relationship with them, as all people who love NPR do. Not even love-hate, but just, the sketch. So I'd done the sketch at the Groundlings, actually, and then did it, repeatedly at Saturday night. And then when Alec was hosting, that was, the joke came up, I don't know, the writer's, I think Dennis, who I wrote it with, pitched it first, and then, we ended up writing it. So it was, anyway, it did end up, you never know when it's so weird, because people always ask me, what was it like? But you never know when you're creating anything, if it's going to take, so it's not, that sketch in particular, has had half-lives. I mean, it was incredibly successful in the moment. People loved it and it played really well. People thought it was hilarious, ha ha ha. Then, you're like, oh, that was great. But then you went on with your life, And I also, the weird thing, it hasn't been that much time, but the internet has changed everything since I was on the show. And when I was there, even the last couple of years I was there, you would maybe TiVo it. Like you wouldn't have things that would show up on the internet the next day. So it's kind of interesting, like how things have changed in terms of like culture and the way we consume it. It was, you did the show live, and if people talked about it the next day, then like lucky you. Or if they taped it, they videoed it. My parents have videotapes of the show, which is so sad.
Still VHS.
Yeah, I finally went back and got everything like put onto a jump drive because it made me sad to go back to their house and see these old VHSs.
So there's VHSs sitting on a shelf somewhere in D.C.?
Actually, they live in New Mexico now. My parents sadly left D.C., but my father-in-law's still there, so that's where my family is.
And they brought the VHSs with them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but that's true. Like, I mean, in the day, you either saw it live, maybe you taped it, or you know, if those old skits would maybe show up on like a highlight show or a clip show or something.
Exactly.
Nowadays, now it's all on Hulu. You can pull up Sweaty Balls or the Culps or all of your stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if the Culps, I unfortunately, see, a lot of the stuff I did was musical, so it's harder to find because nobody wants to pay for the rights, so they don't want to re-air it. Yeah, so it's like the Culps are actually really quite hard to find.
Let the legend grow.
Yeah, you can dig around and find them, but yeah, the same thing goes with this Gemini's twin, this Destiny's Child parody that I did with Maya Rudolph, and yeah, quite a few of them, like my sort of more music-oriented things.
Yeah. Well, us here in D.C., we also remember all of the sort of the politicians you played. There's some internet buzz of Ted Cruz's wife. It was
ridiculous.
There's
right.
all kinds of ridiculous stuff. There's a chance for you to go back for a guest appearance.
Well, Kate McKinnon does a Killer Hillary, so that's done. I did Hillary like 1.0. You know, I did her when she was the first lady and the first lady only, so it wasn't much of a there wasn't so much meat there. I think right in my last season she was running for Senate. We did a couple of things there, but again, she was running for New York Senate. Like nobody really cared in terms of comedy fodder. You know, she's become a much more. An impression is only as interesting as the work that someone's doing. So you know, she's gone on to do such incredibly accomplished things as a senator. You know, Secretary of State and all that. So there's just more to play there. But
all right, cool. Well, now moving along here to Broadway. You mentioned you were in a bunch of shows. I think 4. Wicked was the big one, obviously. You were, you know, and then Three Penny Opera, Rocky Horror. You know, what are your fond memories of Broadway in terms of, you know, I guess bringing you back to your musical and your singing and theater roots as opposed to comedy?
Yeah, they're really different. You know what I mean? They're like utterly different. It was a cool extreme to go to after SNL because everything on SNL is about like getting it out, you know, and working quickly and spontaneously and under enormous pressure. And whereas Wicked is like the same amount of pressure, but it's all about refinement and exactitude. So, you know, because it's such a huge part, and there's all Broadway shows, all theater is done in this kind of very elaborate and specific and tracked way, because you have to do the same thing every day, pretty much exactly the same. It doesn't have to be the same performance exactly, but it has to be, you know, like you literally walk the same traffic pattern every day so that you don't go careening into somebody. You know, it was a really interesting challenge, and I loved it. And I loved it in a completely different way than I loved SNL. It's just good for your voice to sing every day. I mean, if you know, there's no substitute for that, you know. So
keep working that muscle.
Yeah, exactly. So I made up for a lot of lost time, which was great and really necessary if I was going to try to do it for real, you know. Exactly.
Well, I mean, now, but all of those shows and SNL and everything, you're a household name now, and you know, how are you the one that they called? You know, recently we just saw you on with the Strahan.
Oh
thing.
yeah, I've done that. I go in and sit in on some of those chairs when people. Again, I think just because I'm not as scared of being live as other people are. Yeah, it doesn't knock me out maybe the way I understand it would be terrifying to a lot of people, and I've done that like when they've gone on vacation and stuff. So that's actually that's why they called, because I'm here in New York and undaunted by drama.
Yeah. How speaking of that, how do you like sort of maintain? You walk out there, you know, there's a little controversy backstage, and the viewers are picking up on that too. How do you just maintain that calm and just sit there and host the show?
You know, I didn't. They kept it pretty in house. I wasn't really that aware of anything. You know, I mean, whatever. It's not. I wish I could be more interesting about it. It wasn't my drama, you know. So I knew I was just there to help out and smooth things over for the day. So that's what I tried to do.
Yeah, well, you stepped in there and you did your job.
Yeah, I had fun. I really liked that show. I really like Kelly. I really like Michael. So it's familiar territory for me, and so it's always fun every time I go.
Awesome. Well, speaking of familiar territory, Arena Stage, we'll close it back out, come full circle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so you said you grew up going there, and, you know, what's it going to be like to be back out there, and, you know, but in a completely different way now?
I know, it's amazing. I never would have imagined it, and I really am excited, and I think I'm going to have, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing whoever comes out of the woodwork from D.C. I have old friends and colleagues from Sidwell and neighborhood friends from Capitol Hill, and so I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, if our WTOP listeners are listening, what's the final, why should they come out? They've seen you and all this stuff, and they have a free night on Monday.
The main reason they should come out is to support Arena Stage. We're going to have a great time. We're going to have a hoot and hollering time. I think the whole goal of it is to not be serious in any way. And it's like it's a fun, ridiculous evening in honor of a great D.C. institution. So, that's really the reason they should come out. It's not, there's nothing, it's not going to be turgid or boring or, your garden variety benefit fair. It's going to be a good night.
Awesome. Well, we're looking forward to it. It's a great venue and a great person that's going to be there yourself. Over the years, thanks so much for all the laughs and now for the singing. We can't wait to see you.
Yeah, I look forward to doing it. I really do. And thanks for plugging it. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Ana Gasteyer on WTOP.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the D.C. area is great, and Podcast D.C. gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast D.C. is the new local app with hundreds of D.C. area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast D.C.